Um, Welcome everyone to another Zoom event with Buffalo Street Books. My name is Isis Truman Davis. I'm the events coordinator at the bookstore, and we are so happy to have you here. For those of you who don't know, I don't know who wouldn't, but if you don't know, Buffalo Street Books is a cooperative, independent community bookstore owned by more than 800 community members. The cooperative was formed in 2011 to help keep the bookstore here in Ithaca. Now we are working towards sustained growth and building a thriving literary and cultural center here at the bookstore. You're already helping just by attending this event, even virtually. And there's lots of information on these initiatives along with upcoming events at our website, which is buffalostreetbooks.com. For this evening's presentation, we are so excited to host a whole slew of local writers as they read selections from their freshly released From the Finger Lakes, a Memoir Anthology. Please welcome Stacey Murphy, Peg Boyers, Ken McClane, David Lehman, Edward Hauer, Dan Rosenberg, and Jack Hopper. We have lots of copies of From the Finger Lakes available in store now. You can order online or call ahead, and we'll be happy to set a copy aside for you. Thank you so much for attending. I want to remind you to please change your view to speaker once we're done with these introductions so you can see the authors' beautiful faces as they read their work. So now please welcome Stacey Murphy and tonight's Cayuga Lake Books authors.
Thank you, Isis. I also would like to sort of encourage everybody up in the corner. If you're not familiar with Zoom so much, you'll see a button that says view, and you can change between gallery and speaker. Right now, as you're looking at the screen, if you see a lot of little squares or rectangles, you're in gallery view. If you change that to speaker, then your screen will feature in the middle larger whoever's reading at the time, and that may enhance your experience with the reading a bit too. You may also want to turn off your camera in addition to being muted if the sound is doing something kind of funky for you, because if that happens, then sometimes the amount of data your computer or whatever is using can enhance the experience. So you may want to do that too. Anyway, again, thank you, Isis and Buffalo Street Books, for hosting us tonight. And I'd like to thank all of you for sharing this hour with us. We are really happy to present From the Finger Lakes, a Memoir Anthology. I'm Stacey Murphy, as she said, and I'll be introducing all of our readers tonight. One change for tonight, regrettably, Min Phong Ho had last-minute internet issues from her location, and we intend to feature her in one of our future readings, but instead you'll hear anthology selections from Edward Hauer and myself tonight. This is the third anthology by Cayuga Lake Books, and it has a rich blend of appealing stories. The anthology has a variety of writing styles, from thoughtful and interesting and amusing essays. I think that's what was in our Ithaca Times article, from essays to poetry. And though the people are all from the Finger Lakes, stories from here, they range from here to around the world, and in total, 81 poets and prose writers contributed to the anthology. A number of you are here tonight. Again, super exciting. All of which of the contributors are from upstate New York, and many are from Ithaca. So, to get us started, it is my pleasure to introduce Peg Boyers. She's our first reader tonight. Peg is the executive director of Salmagundi magazine. She teaches poetry workshops at Skidmore, Columbia, and the New York State Summer Writers Institute. Her work has appeared in numerous journals and magazines, and she's the author of 4 books of poems, the latest being The Album. We are glad this virtual format meant that you could read here tonight. Welcome, Peg.
Thank you so much, Stacey and Isis, and all of you good people at Cayuga Lake Books, Edward and Jack. Thank you so much for including me in this beautiful anthology. I'm going to start with a poem that's in here. It's actually about my mother in her last days, not a cheerful poem to start off with, but I'll read it with as much good cheer as I can. It's called The Last Wait. Between wall and wall, tucked tight in your bed, you wait, wishing not to wake. Let this be the night. But with dawn, your eyes open and you find yourself here, awake. You cannot finish what's begun. You rot from outside in. First the skin, once a burnished olive, radiant and smooth, now blistered, blighted with moles. Next, the bones gone soft, flesh loosed over dissolving armature. Your fingers by now useless, digits. Right shoulder and agony arrested in a remorseless hunch. When I turn you, you want to cry out, but hold back, hold out. Inside the porous, wasted shell, the dignified will insists, lifts its cureless head, refuses one last time to give in. At 90, you say no to everything unbeautiful and unkempt. Keep your vigil, comb your hair, moisten your own sweet lips, and wait for death, for dinner, whichever comes first. The meal arrives, sauteed liver and onions, fegato alla veneziana, you say, the Italian still there cheering you for a moment, distracting you from your desire to die. Or is it my desire, my impatience more than yours? And I say, don't eat it, mamita, let it go. Satisfy your body's other hunger to be done out of all this now, over. You smile weakly in agreement and eat. So that was actually an acrostic poem that's included in my new book, the album also, but it first came out here. So thank you again for including me. So I'm going to read another poem, which comes, it's published elsewhere. It's a more recent poem and I'm eager to read it. It was in the magazine Liberties. And it comes out of the experience that many of us had of rocking all over the place with our partners or alone during the first months of the pandemic. And my husband and I used to go to the Saratoga Cemetery, and this poem came from that. It's called For the Afterlife. She wanted a crypt, like the Temple of Dendur, an enormous monolith, unshakable as their marriage. He favored the granite sarcophagus, gaily decorated in William Morris swirls and oak leaf cornices. She wanted poplars tall and straight, leafy and shameless as Italian trees of summer, if sadly deciduous. He preferred cypresses, their constancy through the seasons, and shrubs, yew or arborvitae, modest and low to the ground. She fancied a stone table with seats for friends to come dine, al fresco. He said a few high back benches would do. She said, as long as they're comfortable, without tacky prayers or words like father and mother inscribed. When they settled on the white granite love seat carved from a single block, its elegantly supportive back to the forest, they were told it was impossible to order now that the factories which made them in China and India were closed. Everything in the world was closed. And yet they strolled, faces masked, every day in these grounds, secure in their solitude, among the decorated dead, the veterans from Gettysburg, the Somme, Normandy and Saigon, and all the wars against measles, flu, whooping cough, and plague. Whole families wiped out by one contagion or another, resting now in the rolling hills and burial mounds, under marble markers by now mostly effaced, amid medals and flags stabbed into the earth to celebrate their valor Here, among the ancient oaks and stalwart pines, clustered in stately groves joined each to each by pebbled paths and avenues, daily they walked, stopped, and even sat, feeling strangely welcome and terribly alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Peg, for those. They were beautiful and lovely. The imagery from the beginning of the days, months of the pandemic is always interesting to hear what people have been going through in different ways, and the contrasts in those were quite nice. Thanks so much for being here. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Kenneth A. McClane. Ken is up next. Ken has been teaching at Auburn Correctional Facility since his retirement from Cornell, where he taught for 37 years. He is the author of 8 volumes of poetry and 2 collections of personal essays, including Take 5, Collected Poems, 1971 to 1976, and Color, Essays on Race, Family, and History. And he'll be sharing his prose piece with us today. So thank you very much, Ken. Welcome. Isis, can you share Ken's screen?
Ken, can you unmute? There you go.
Can you all see me?
I think you need to maybe turn on your video.
Huh. Weird.
Do you have tape over your camera like I do?
No, I don't. It's
Huh.
weird.
Where
It's
it
absolutely-
says stop
Doing
video,
absolutely, it's doing absolutely nothing.
right next to the button that says mute, there's a button that says stop video.
Yeah.
Should
Should I hit that?
And see what happens.
I did, and it's doing zilch.
Oh, okay.
Now it just, yeah. I don't know, what the heck? I am sorry, I'm getting nothing.
Ken, I can hear you, and if nothing else, we get your voice and hear your wonderful essay. Without,
Why don't I just read it? I'm sorry I'm not here.
oh, you're here. It's just that you're not here visually. That's okay.
Ken, in the bottom left corner of
Mhm.
your screen,
It says, I'll try it again. It says start video.
yes, click start video.
I am, and it's doing zilch. It isn't changing.
That's very frustrating. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's great to be here, and I'm sorry for this. The new invitee. My mother's only full sister, Myrtle, always thrilled my childhood mind. I didn't see her often since she lived in Georgia, a place as mythical to me, the northern boy, as Xanadu. Myrtle was simply elegant, and though my mother was lovely in spirit, wonderful cheekbones, and a delicate hauteur, Myrtle, wearing her prim, beautifully tailored suits, possessed the dazzling balance of grandeur and earthiness. I simply could not make sense of her. Myrtle, at least to my small mind, seemed capable of everything. I once asked her to take me to a storefront church in my Harlem neighborhood, which was really a rather dreary place full of the disenfranchised, but on Sunday mornings was thick with singing, testifying, and stern rebuke for last week's dissipation. The church was formerly an old shoe repair shop, and you could see the remnants of the electric wires like small plugs of hair framing the hand-pointed gilded cross, which was multicolored and garish, with a black Christ who amazingly had steel blue eyes like the progeny of some mad geneticist. The preacher was a thin, serious man, so well starched and pressed that my friend Robin called him Mr. Clean Slinky, thinking of the toy then indispensable to us. Robin's analogy never made much sense to me, since a slinky seemed to collapse in every possible direction, but Robin, I now realize, was being metaphorical. The preacher did seem other-centered, proximate, diffuse, like an erector set gone haywire. Myrtle, who never intended to take me to the church, being a Riversider in spirit, that's someone who attended Riverside Church, the great cathedral near Columbia University, where one could hear William Sloane Coffin, Ronald Niebuhr, and yes, Dr. King's famous oration against the war in Vietnam, said in a voice as boisterous as Bessie Smith's, "Ken, you've got too much spirit for churches. Come, let's go and get pancakes." Now, I can't explain why the conjoining of spirit and pancakes seems so magical to me, but pancakes to this day evince the very cup of trembling. And then there is the story about Myrtle's desire to get a learner's permit in Georgia in the 1940s. Myrtle had married a dentist and moved from Boston, where she was born, to the South to be with her husband, who had a very healthy practice in the Afro-American community there. After 6 years in the small hamlet in which she resided, where Myrtle had become secretary to the local Black Parents Association and founded the local NAACP chapter, Myrtle decided to learn to drive so as not to grow idle, as she put it, waiting for the geriatric bus. As was the practice those days, she went to the local sheriff who took care of licensing motor vehicles. "Aren't you that Negro girl who married the Negro dentist?" the sheriff asked. "Yes," Myrtle demurely answered, balancing her anger at the racial denigration with her desire not to show any disrespect, something that might well cost her far more than the loss of the right to drive a car. "Well, since you were smart enough to marry that dentist, you don't need a permit. Here, I'm giving you a license. You can drive right now. There's no use to fool around with any of this. You don't need to take a test," the sheriff stated, motioning for her to accept the license, and watched as her thin body moved, proud, if a bit tentative, before him. "Thank you," Myrtle said, taking the license, surprised at how quickly she had been formed from the novitiate to the elect, and headed home with her friend who had driven her. The experience was boorish, yes, but it was not as horrific as she imagined. Another friend of hers had gone to a different sheriff in a neighboring county, and he had seemingly been the height of the Southern gentleman, speaking to her with unusual courtesy, calling her Mrs. Smith. And yet, as she was collecting her license, he stood up, tore the form in two, and hit her squarely across the mouth. "Get out of here! Get out of here!" he yelled. Myrtle had not suffered any of this. She didn't like how the sheriff's eyes lingered on her body. She didn't like his absolute denial of any sense that she existed outside of her husband. And she didn't like being called Negro girl, which she knew was segregation's shorthand. The sheriff was being mannerly. He would not speak about seeing her to his friends using the same delicate term. Still, she had waltzed out with her license, with barely a frizz of her hair. Myrtle felt the joy of knowing that she would no longer have to take a colored taxi, wait for the bus, or have to walk through the hundreds of eyes of men, white and black alike, mentally undressing her. though one man had the temerity to upbraid her for all to witness. Uppity bitch, she'd squeal like a hog, he said. Myrtle had a mind to tell him something that would truly hog-tie him, but she wasn't stupid. She understood men. 6 feet of mouth, 2 inches of brain, she once told me about one of her husband's fellow dentists. The next day, dressed up as always in her smart suit and clutching her new license, Aunt Myrtle sidled behind the wheel of her husband's car, drove 6 blocks, and with a few halting jerks as the clutch hit the floor, plunged the hood of her automobile 16 feet through the anteroom of a lovely house, tumbling a morass of books, slicing through the dining room of a white family just beginning to sit down to eat. When the car stopped, my aunt was 3 feet from a surprised man who, amazingly, in his fit of shock, asked what she desired to eat. No one was hurt at all. I've always thought about this vignette as one that testifies to what racism or any belittling of others invariably accomplishes. In the sheriff's malevolence, he presaged the situation in which an entire family almost lost their lives. Still, I can't imagine how that family felt seeing their new invitee, my Aunt Myrtle, prim, proper, and though a bit disheveled after the accident, sitting at their dining room table. I asked Myrtle if she had said anything to them, and I recall how her eyes twinkled. She was about to tell me a falsehood, something that would enlarge the mythic aunt I had loved. But she was a church later, a Riversider, and for the first time in my life, she said, almost as if even she could barely comprehend it, that she had been absolutely church mouse silent. Thank you. I wish I could see you all.
I wish we could see you too again. Ugh, I'm so sorry. We heard you loud and clear though. It was still wonderful reading, and thank you so much for sharing the mythic Aunt Myrtle with us. Thank you so much. Okay. So next I would like to introduce you to David Lehman. David has lived in Ithaca since 1980. His distinguished career includes many collections of poetry, and his newest book of poems, The Morning Line, came out in fall 2021. Cornell University Press will publish his study, The Mysterious Romance of Murder, Crime, Detection, and the Spirit of Noir in spring 2022. David, it's your turn. Thank you.
I think I've unmuted. Oh, good. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for including me in this book, Edward and Jack, and thank you for organizing the evening, Buffalo Street Books, and Isis and Stacey Murphy, and so nice to see, or at least hear, people like Ken McClane and Peg Boyers, and I can tell Laura Glenn is here, and so are Joe Martin and Nancy Couto and Peter Fortunato and Mary Gilliland. So it's very nice to see you in this period where I haven't seen anybody really for about 24 months. However, I have been writing a poem a day, reviving an old practice. I did that for a while. And some of the poems, naturally, since I've been living here, are Ithaca-centric. So 4 of them are in the book. They're all short. And they all have as their title the date on which they were written. And I should just say that a character named Johnny is a black Schipperke dog that keeps walking into the room when I have the door open here. Very, very good fellow. October 30, 2020. If you have to lock yourself down, Ithaca is the place to do it. And you're the one I'd like to do it with. Curves, hills, falls, brooks, streams going down. The oaks have shed their leaves, the maples too, and the rain is cold and hard and constant. The ground wet like the pavement in Cambridge when I lived there, crossing the bridge twice daily, except then I didn't have a working fireplace. Johnny and I walk and the conversation is exhilarating if one-sided. And what's waiting for us is black bean soup and gluten-free bread and ice-cold seltzer with a twist of lime. October 31, 2020. The sunset earlier, the sky as spooky as the 19th century, skeletal trees, a brief orange glow before the blues and grays darken in a landscape that lasts for an hour, before the shapes dissolve into the dark of All Hallows, a night as sacred as would scare us, the guiltless ones, who maintain our belief in metaphysics, which French philosophes declared dead in 1970 or so. As the last branches disappear into the heavenly darkness, what remains is what resists and what clings to the oblivion of a fallen world that exists in memory only, and poetry. November 18, 2020. There can be snow and wind and rain, and still the sky blends more shades of blue, white, purple, even pink, than the most expensive set of crayons at the art supply store. And then the white clouds of Ithaca acquire gray overalls and patches of a darker blue, worn that evening, has arrived 60 minutes early. November 20, 2020. It's surprisingly warm in the high 50s, I guess, but unsurprisingly bright because my window faces west, and at 3:15 in the Ithaca afternoon, the spectacle is about ready to begin, and Stacey and I, having something to celebrate, will do so with champagne at 4:15 on the terrace, where we shall witness the changes, the beautiful changes in the sky. I remember the first time I read The Beautiful Changes by Richard Wilbur, and my surprise on learning that beautiful is the noun and changes the verb in that sweet sentence. So those are the 4 poems of mine that are in this anthology, and thank you for listening, and I'll look forward to the next reader. And I'll, I guess, mute. Now I'll become some mute inglorious Milton.
Thanks, David. That was lovely.
I think I lost, I don't know what happened.
We can see you and hear you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Try using the little microphone down in the corner.
To do what? Oh.
If you're trying to mute yourself.
Oh, well, let's see. Gee. Am I still talking?
Yep.
Am I still talking now? There's a great sentence.
Oh, there. You're all sorted. Thank you so much. I love the reference at the end of that series. It was not a poem I'd heard of before, and it made me want to go read it. So thank you for sharing all of that. So at this point, We have our pinch hitting readers. Edward has asked me to read my poem that was in the anthology, and so I will do that. It's called Caroline Barn. And if you're from Ithaca or live here, and you've driven east towards Binghamton or Whitney Point or west into Ithaca on Route 79 from that direction, you've passed through Slaterville Springs, and undoubtedly you probably noticed this little fallen down barn off in the field. Just a small little barn. When I first moved here 25 years ago, it was already leaning, and it continued to lean. And last year it finally fell down, and it became a course of a lot of conversation and a lot of strong feelings, especially by people in that area, because people had memories of this place. And so my contribution to the anthology is in its voice. It's called The Caroline Barn. Lifetimes have passed. I greeted you when you moved to town. I watched the night you sped west to the hospital. Then 3 days later, passing slowly east, a new tiny boy in the back seat. I watched hands plant, felt the thrum of tractors circling, and watched a girl across the street growing through morning fog as she waited for the school bus week after week. I held farm tools inside, held turkey buzzards on my sagging roof, held threads of each of your nods, conscious or unknowing, weaved with magic into webs by demure spiders. You all have heard nothing gold can stay, and neither can old wood. So undo one more tether and note the changes in the air, trees and grass. You'll take it from here, and the ground will hold memories to feed worms and other things that grow on. Thank you. And next, I am going to introduce Edward Hauer, who you all know. Edward is the author of 11 books of fiction and a collection of memoir essays. His latest novel, River Music, is also available at Buffalo Street Books, and he will be sharing his piece Clink with us that was in the anthology. Edward, you're up.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Loud and clear. You're good.
You're good. Okay, I'm good. Well, I'm glad to be here with everyone, and thank you all for showing up for this reading. Thank you for Buffalo Street Books for sponsoring the reading. It looks like a good event, lots of people coming. And I'll read from my short essay from the Cayuga Lake Books, From the Finger Lakes, a memoir anthology. I wonder, before I start, if any of you out there have ever had a crush on your teacher when you were a little kid. You can all raise your visual hands if you like. I think this is pretty common. I will read you about my teacher in the essay from the book called Clink. My parents kept threatening to send me from PS 8, the public school, to the private country day school in town. But I heard the place was full of snobs, and I made a terrible stink every time they mentioned my changing schools. Each fall, my mother invited my new teacher to tea to check on her credentials, hoping to find an excuse to transfer me. But the teachers at the public school were friendly, elderly spinsters who had somehow never lost their enthusiasm for hamsters or Peter and the Wolf. My mother was impressed enough with them that she let me stay at PS8 for another year. But during the fall of my 6th grade year, I had a teacher whom I kept putting off inviting to tea. I knew my mother wouldn't like her. Miss McClane was amazingly young for a teacher, perhaps 35. She had curly black hair and big dark eyes. She wore purple blouses, plaid skirts, wide belts made of colored leather. Her wrists clinked with a bracelet of gold charms, which she actually let us touch. Everyone, girls included, fell in love with her. She could often be talked into telling us funny stories about her mischievous nieces and nephews who were our age. It astounded us that a teacher could have a personal life. We more or less assumed that when we left school after the last bell, all the teachers curled up under their desks and waited for us to arrive the next morning. Miss McQuader was occasionally grouchy, but she gave us warning when she came in, explaining that she'd been up all the night before on a train from Dover, Delaware, a city which began to take on an aura of mystery to us. She read us stories about knights and ladies, tales of true love, which the girls liked more than the boys. When the boys in the back row, the older ones who were repeating the grade, began whispering and hitting each other, she didn't silence them with icy looks the way the other teachers did. She walked up the center aisle, her bracelet clinking, to argue with the tough guys, as she called them. Eventually, we heard a hoarse musical laugh bubble up out of her. It was obvious that the boys were making noise just so she'd go to the back of the class and talk to them. No other teacher would do that. Then one day, she didn't come to school. We had a substitute who quizzed us on state capitals. I waited for word about how Miss McQuader was. No word came. Approaching the classroom every morning, I listened for her in the halls. They seemed bleak without her. After several weeks, though, we got used to the substitute teacher and even treated her with a grim civility. Suddenly, Miss Quater was back. Just before the first bell rang, she jingled into class in a loose skirt and purple blouse and shiny black high heels. Wild cheers and applause greeted her. This made her break out crying. Everyone stared. She wiped her face with a lacy handkerchief. Her eyelashes looked like dark, wounded butterflies. Her cheeks went a spectacular shade of pink. Finally, she told us how much she'd missed us. We all tried to talk to her at once. Everyone figured out she'd been sick. That was the only reason teachers ever missed school. One of the boys in the back row called, "What was wrong with you?" Slowly, she raised her face. Her damp eyes shone. "Nothing," she said. "I'm pregnant." Recovering from shock, one of the girls offered congratulations. Miss McQuader smiled and swallowed hard. "I'm very happy about it," she said. Then her face fell. Lines appeared in her forehead that we hadn't seen before. "But the school board's not happy," she said. "They wouldn't even give me permission to come say goodbye to you." "Goodbye?" A hush fell over the class. "They don't think I'm fit to teach you anymore," she said. "Why not?" I asked, and several others joined in. "Because the people who run your school are nothing but a bunch of Republicans." She pressed her knuckles against her lips. "You see, I don't have a husband. The man I love decided he didn't want to marry me. So I'm just going to go ahead and have my baby anyway." She narrowed her eyes at the flag hanging at the back of the corner of the room. "Do you think this makes me a bad teacher?" I'd never heard of an unmarried woman having a child before. I'd vaguely assumed that it was illegal. One girl said that she had a cousin who had a baby without a husband, and then another girl said that she did too. And we all agreed that this didn't make anyone an unfit teacher. Miss McQuater thanked us over and over and hugged as many kids as she could get her arms around. My face was pressed into her soft blouse. I inhaled the dizzy mixture of strong perfume and sweat. And then she was gone. At dinner that night, when I told my parents about what had happened, they were outraged that a woman like that had been allowed to upset a classroom full of children. I kept asking them why Miss McQuater's being pregnant meant that she couldn't be a good teacher. But the matter was much too complicated to discuss. This time, my mother enrolled me in the country day school for the next fall. For the time being, though, I went back to the public school. The new teacher was a gray-haired woman who wore shoes that squeegeed as she walked briskly up and down the aisle. The kids in the back row never disturbed the class by fooling around. Her sharp glances kept them in a state of sullen defeat. I got used to stuffing my brain full of facts. But every now and then, as I sat at my desk, I would hear the clink of what sounded like a charm bracelet rising from the sidewalk beneath the window. And I would look out, hoping to catch a glimpse of a purple blouse and bouncy black curls. Miss McQuater, on her way back to us from Dover, Delaware, with a baby in her arms. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. It's lovely to read and also lovely to hear. I loved how even from the opening paragraphs of that story, you could tell that something was just going to happen because none of the good teachers, sorry, a lot of times the teachers you like the most are not the ones that stay. So you set that up super well. Our last reader is Dan Rosenberg. Dan is, he recorded his presentation ahead. He's currently on an airplane and he couldn't join us in person. He regrets that, and that is regrettable. But for me, at least, an upside of the recording was the nature poems he shared are just luxurious, and I got to see them a couple times. So anyway, Dan's latest book is Bassinet. It was just published this week by Carnegie Mellon University Press and is also available at Buffalo Street Books and elsewhere. His work has won the American Poetry Journal Prize and the Omnidawn Poetry Chapbook Contest, and new poems can be found online at the Adroit Journal and Poets.org. Rosenberg is the chair of the English department at Wells College, and he lives in Ithaca. And now I'm going to see if the wonders of technology will cooperate, and I can share the screen. All right, hopefully you can see this. And can someone just put right in the chat if you can see this so I can make sure before I start it.
We can see it, Stacey, thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Okay.
Hi, this is Dan Rosenberg. I'd just like to thank the wonderful people at Cayuga Lake Books, particularly Jack and Stacey, who helped me make this little virtual appearance happen. I'm really sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I'm grateful to be included and to share the pages of this beautiful anthology with so many great writers. And I also wanted to thank Buffalo Street Books, all the lovely folks over there who are a pillar of our community and did a lovely job making this event happen. So I'll just read the two poems from the anthology. The first one is called Husbandry. The green beans topple on thin stems. Two rats pack their peas across the skin of last night's rain. Again, I have tied the wild to a stake and bid it grow. A sparrow, flush with seeds, stuck headfirst in the feeder, eats and freaks and eats until I reach up, tug it by the tail feathers. It weighs nothing like a heartbeat. Like a breath, I release it into the magnolia, press my heels back down to the grass. Below, a world thrums in the dirt, sheared bricks and landlocked sea glass the worms weave through, smoothed slowly with each step and root. Still deeper, the dead spill their heat from here to the horizon. They don't rise. What rises, rises from them, while I stand planted here and sinking. And the second poem is called Buttermilk Falls. And throughout the pandemic, I've taken our son hiking through the various gorges and around the waterfalls in the area. And this is one of several poems that came out of those experiences. Buttermilk Falls. We step on barren stones while between them the cracks teem with small living. A game we play. Who can leave the world most undisturbed? The water says be like water, leave the slowest fingerprint, but we can barely hear it over the falls. The pebbles blunt their edges on our heels. We are sediment. Two accidental statues, me and my son, unsteady on the rump of summer. What counts as life in the slush and wash around us? The star moss wept somehow against my ankle, and I seem now more of this place than I was. Undivorced from stem and root, untroubled as a stalagmite under a generous sun. I bend beside my son, balance stone upon stone. The moss remains, luminous and still. We make a home for it, and it survives. Thank you very much.
So that was Dan Rosenberg. I love some good nature poetry. But that's the conclusion of our reading tonight. Of all of our readers, please, now we would like to open it up for questions if we could. So please, if you have questions, share them in the chat, or we probably can do unmuting now and just allow people to ask people questions.
I have a general question for any of the writers who'd like to answer. All of us have been affected by the pandemic, but I was wondering if anyone wants to answer how their writing has been affected by the pandemic. They've had a lot more to say, they've had a lot less to say, that kind of stuff.
Well, I wish I had had the ability to write so much during the pandemic. I didn't. I have a good friend who has written a novel and a novella throughout this pandemic. I thought I might do something like that, but I didn't. But I am now writing again. Some writers it's been good for in an awful way, and some not. So I wonder if the other writers have found this a good or bad experience for their writing, just for their writing.
Well, I can't say that it was good or bad, but what I can say is that I felt pressed to fight depression. I hate that word. I pushed hard to find goodness and rebirth and hope, so that my poems really didn't dwell entirely on the suffering, but how we could find our way out of it.
I can report that I wrote a great deal during the last 2 years. I believe in writing every day. I'm a professional writer, and I get paid to do that. And so being alone in a room with a typewriter or a computer keyboard is not unusual for me. And there were fewer reasons not to do it, because I'm over a certain age. I've survived cancer, and I was very risk averse. So I would sit at the computer, and I finished a book and wrote a monthly column. And these are things that are really very enjoyable to me as a writer. And so oddly, that's been a silver lining in the otherwise very distressing period. But I think we as writers, well, I as a writer really benefit from time spent alone and undisturbed. And certainly there was a lot of time in isolation, and that continues to be the case. I usually, in the past, I would spend half my time in New York City, and I haven't been there except for short visits in 2 years. So New York City is sort of the very opposite of Ithaca. Ithaca is a very tranquil place. And as I said in my poem, I said, if you have to lock down somewhere, this is a good place to be in that condition. But others will want to speak, no doubt.
Yeah, I just want to, I guess, share a very similar experience. I felt, the way you did, David, the kind of exhilaration in this privacy and somehow all the clamor of life quieted down, and it was a good moment to start just really getting to work writing. And so I'm teaching still at Skidmore, so I didn't have quite the open schedule that some others had. But as the pandemic wore on, and my students got actually quite depressed. Sorry, Sonia, Daphne, for using that word, but they did. They were quite depressed, and one spent more time actually teaching and helping students write their experience than spending time with myself writing. So so I had a little bit of both, the sense of exhilaration and energy and wanting just to plunge in and write a lot, and then having somehow this other thing take over as, wow, this is our life now, So but I think it's opening up now, and my muse, it seems to be coming back. So fingers crossed.
Thank you for that. That's a lot of good insight. Wondering if anyone has any other questions. Got lots of writers answering.
Hi, I wanted
some
to,
questions.
I forgot to tell Stacey how much I liked her poem about Caroline and the barn. I had lived up in the Catskills where their barns were leaning for years and years and years, and you'd see them, and then one day you wouldn't. And it's a wonderful image, and I like that poem a lot. And I like David's poems too. I liked everybody's work tonight. I'm really thrilled to be among you all. And Ken, I wish we could see you, but we certainly heard your golden voice, and it was a wonderful piece that you read. So I'm just, this is a good night for me. I'm having a good time here.
Good.
When will we hear Daphne's poem and other poems? Will there-
We're going to have more readings, I hope. We're going to schedule them, I think, at the library, and hopefully it's spring rights. We're going to apply for that anyway. So we'll keep you up to speed. There will be, I'm almost sure, another reading, maybe even two. And we have a lot of other writers who will be participating.
There's another great question that's come in on the chat. It says, I lost it. I'm curious what the weirdest thing in Ithaca or the area has been that has inspired any of the writers. I mean, this is Ithaca. There's a lot of weird inspiration. It's hard to sort of pick my brain on one, but.
I feel the opposite in the sense that I'm a New York City native, and I've spent a great deal of my adult life working there. And that's a place where the unexpected is happening around the corner, and with a great deal of bombast and noise, and the feeling that history is being made. And Ithaca is a very important community, but one of the things about it is that I feel safe when I get to a stop sign. If I should dawdle for a moment, somebody isn't going to be honking behind me, and nor will I be trying to pass someone on a one-lane road. And I have a dog, and I walk the dog. Other dog walkers walk by. We walk to the waterfall. I can't imagine a friendlier, more peaceable place. So I don't associate it with weirdness at all. Also, I retired from my faculty appointment when I had to teach, and I did love teaching. I did not like going to faculty meetings. And there are a great many of them, and I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to serve on any phony faculty committees, which were really the bane of my existence. And every morning when I wake up, I feel like singing "Put on a Happy Face" because I don't have cancer and I don't have to go to any faculty meeting. It's like
similar activities, possibly like radiation or something. I would guess faculty meetings and the crap you have to pick up was there, and the treatment for chemo or something.
Well, I went through chemo and surgery, and you know what happened is a post-traumatic in a sense that while going through all of that, I was numb to the predicament. I came close to death a few times, but wasn't really aware of it. In the sense I was living day to day, trying to get through each day. But now a few years have gone by, and I'm in touch with a certain fear. And also when I go to sleep at night, I feel like I'm entering the big sleep, as Raymond Chandler called it.
You're an expert on detective books, yes. And, well, I'm glad you woke up and you're still with us. That's good. Ken, you've been teaching too, but you've been teaching like me at the Auburn Correctional Facility, otherwise known as a prison. Did those guys have an effect on your writing at all, do you think, in the prison?
Well, I work very little with prisoners, although they've been in contact with me. I'm never really sure. I get a letter every so often from a incarcerated person. They usually want me to read their poetry, and that way they're not that different from hedge fund managers who also want me to read their poetry.
David, I wonder if Ken, who's been doing this for a number of years, are you still with us, Ken? Nope, guess not. Okay, we should get maybe another question.
I want to make sure that we recognize Jack too, who did an awful lot of work coordinating and organizing the poetry section of this book too. So Jack, would you please say a couple words? You have to get, there you go.
Can you hear me? Hello? Yep. Okay.
Yes, we hear you. Speak.
Okay. I just wanted to say a couple of words almost in closing at this point to thank everybody for making this possible, particularly Buffalo Street Books, of course. The anthology was exhausting and exhilarating at the same time. The results, with two previous anthologies under our editorial belts, we weren't entirely surprised by the overwhelming response to our call for poetry and for prose. Poems came from Rochester, Buffalo, Syracuse, Binghamton, Portland, Oregon, Cooperstown, and of course the Ithaca area. Their words on having poetry accepted, one for the first time ever. What a delight to receive my copy of the anthology. Thank you for creating this beautiful book. Thanks for making this anthology happen. I am thrilled and honored to be part of this anthology. Thank you so much for accepting my poem, and on and on. These are all actual quotes. The quality of the submissions and the excitement of corresponding with these artists, both prose writers and poets, makes the efforts of all of us editors smile with relief and satisfaction. Thank you. Please pass along the word among your friends that the anthology, and all of our books for that matter, are available at Buffalo Street Books, also on Amazon. Thanks again for coming out, as it were, staying home in your cozy homes. There is something to Zoom after all. Good night.
Thank you all again so much. It was really, really lovely to see everyone pouring in, supporting the writers and poets and the whole team who worked so hard to bring this book to fruition and to support us in making this event happen. So it's really it's reassuring to see people still showing up for these events, even though we're all kind of sick of it and want to be in person again. It's really nice to see such a great turnout. So thank you very much. And yes, please come into the bookstore and pick up the From the Finger Lakes Memoir Anthology. And some of you also have other books as well available in the bookstore. So we look forward to seeing all of you there. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.